After 15 whole years, it has finally happened. Season 1 came out back in 2010, and this year, 2025, is set to be the release date for Season 2 of Panty and Stocking. This show just has an unbelievably beautiful, iconic, genre-bending art style and amazing characters. But as a 3D artist, I've always wondered if I could adapt one of those characters. So in this video, we're going to go over each step in the process I took to make Panty Anarchy 3D and see how her final 3D model and animations turned out. Also, this is not a sponsored video. They did not pay me to say this. Huge shout out to M.Rage for sending me this amazing Bridget varsity bomber jacket. They sent me this jacket for free, so the least I could do was give them a little bit of a shout out in a video. So I'll have a link to their website below if you want to check them out, because their stuff is super duper high quality and just looks unbelievably cool. So huge thank you to M.Rage for sending this over. But without further ado, let's jump right into it. I started off by creating this turnaround drawing of Panty you see here. Then I color picked from the official key art as a base for my colors after I made this little gray base color. And from there, I colored it in and shaded it using my typical coloring and shading methods. I painstakingly made the proportions as accurate as possible, drawing lines from key art over to my drawing, making sure that things like the eyes, the chin, the arms, and the legs all lined up to be as accurate to the real show's proportions as I could make them. That being said, I did actually mess up my turnaround drawing here. Her torso and head were not exactly aligned in a way that made sense in 3D. It was very different in my front and side views. So to that one person who said they were going to follow along with my turnaround drawing to make a 3D model, I am so sorry. I really love how her eyes turned out here and really wanted to make sure to emulate that loose style I had on them in 3D. You'd think modeling Panty and Stocking characters in low poly would be a pretty easy translation considering they're already pretty polygonal in the show, but it was a lot harder than it looks actually, because yes, they do have very sharp edges sometimes, but they're often contrasted by extremely smooth curves like you see in their legs and sometimes on their arms. I ended up using a lot of tries on her skirt due to my absolute just undying love of tries. If I could marry a triangle, I would. The limbs on Panty and Stocking characters tend to have quite a big taper on them, meaning they go from thick to thin, and that meant I needed to replicate it in 3D, which was quite a challenge, especially in this low poly style, but I think I was able to get something that looks pretty decent here. And because things like her ear and face shape have such incredibly simple shapes in the show, you can kind of replicate that in 3D without using that many polygons. So I was able to get away with quite a lot with very little here. I used the hair from my Carmelita Fox 3D model as a base, then shaped around my turnaround drawings front and side views, which ended up saving me a whole lot of time. I was struggling with how to capture her upper torso in this style before ultimately landing on something that kind of kept her upper and lower torso as one model and her arms and clavicles as another model that intersects with that model. And the hands here are actually just completely stolen from my Modius model. You get to a point in 3D modeling where you create a really big backlog of models that you've already created. And things on those models, different accessories, hair clips, hairstyles, clothing articles, whatever, you can just go back and take from those models and put it in new models, maybe remix them, change them up a little bit, and it just saves you so much time. So the more models you create, I really do think the faster you get at it. And for my texturing process here, for the very first time, I'm using an extremely useful texturing technique called gradient texturing. I'll link some articles and videos below that explain this process. But essentially, it involves placing an extremely small gradient on your texture map. This can be like 32 by 32 pixels. Seriously, it can be so small. Then when you have this on your texture map, you unwrap different sections of your 3D model and place their UVs onto this gradient you have on your texture in order to get super smooth gradient transitions on your model. And I particularly use this on her hair as well as her dress here. So you can notice that in my turnaround drawing, her hair goes from this bright yellow color to a deeper, more saturated and dark orange color. Same with her dress, it's a very bright saturated red, but it comes a little bit darker and less saturated as you go down. Doing this not only simplifies your UV workflow tremendously, but it also saves you a ton of texture space and time. For the first time in a long time, when I was done with my texture map for her body here, I had a ton of empty space that I could put whatever I wanted into. So I'd highly recommend looking into that technique if you haven't heard of it already. It's so useful. It saves you so much time. It's so awesome. While I try to take pieces from my turnaround drawings and put them into my texture map as much as possible, for her heels here, I had to essentially paint them from scratch due to how they would look in 3D in this style. And from reading the comments and what I hear you all say on social media, I know that a lot of you struggle with UVs and texturing your characters, including myself not too long ago, honestly. And that is one of the biggest reasons why I recently added 13 brand new and exclusive videos to my course where we cover in depth how to create your own UV maps, followed by textured maps, as well as a series of exclusive videos that I just added that cover how to design your own characters, create turnaround drawings, and shade your drawings. You get all of that brand new content on top of all the other course bonuses, like the Blender 3D modeling hotkey guide and my low poly parts kit. Plus, there's now an exclusive Discord server included with the Gumroad course that you can join in order to solve technical problems and get feedback on your low poly works, possibly both from me even. Getting all that brand new exclusive content on top of all the existing course bonuses is a pretty sweet deal. And the price of the course is increasing by $10 on February 28th. So by all means, if you are interested in my highly rated course, make sure to click that link in the description below today. In the previous section, I actually spawned in a partially transparent plane that I UV'd her eyes onto using the project from view command. I then moved these planes in her head, and after that I modeled the white of her eye inside her head, then added bones to control each of her irises that were children of her head bone, meaning that they'll follow along with the movement of her head. That might sound a little confusing, but I promise you it's not. I'll actually be releasing a tutorial on how to make and rig stylized eyes just like these ones, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel with notifications turned on. You don't want to miss that. I also modeled her gun called Backlace off camera, which was a ton of fun. Rigging that was super easy because it's just a bone that's a child of her hand bone, meaning that it follows it around while still letting you do things like spin it if you want to in an animation. I then added bones to control her hair, earrings, hand jewelry, and skirt, and after cleaning up my weights, we were ready for the final step before animation. Now this is the fun part. In order to make extra face expressions, I duplicated her face in Photoshop, scooched it over, then using references of screenshots from the show itself, I drew a bunch of extra facial expressions. After I was done drawing all these expressions, I added a bone to my existing rig using the same technique I cover in this video on my channel. So if you want to learn this technique, by all means check that out. And using that setup, I have two bones on my rig here, one for her eye expression and the other for her mouth, where I can use this bone to move between all the different facial expressions I just drew on my character independently of one another, which is so awesome and useful when you're animating. I particularly love how her last expression turned out. It's just so sassy. Now that we have her all rigged up, it's time to make some animations with her. I kind of just winged it. I did look at some reference for spinning guns because I did know that I wanted her to spin her gun before she, equipped it here. And I tried to do a little bit more of a stylized animation style here as well, where things are not interpolated at all, they're just stepped between in order to get more of that stylized animation look. And after I was done with these shots, I then moved on to making an idle animation. And without further ado, let's see how the final 3D character model, rig, and animations turned out in the end.
I'm your worst nightmare. Suck on this!
If you have any characters in the low poly style you'd like to see me create next, make sure to comment them right below. I love hearing from you. And if you want to jumpstart your journey into making low poly characters, make sure to check out the Gumroad version of that series because it has a bunch of bonuses that are greatly going to speed up your character creation process. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.